managing expectations is very difficult to do because we always want to sell that we've got the solution and wow people. And sometimes you can't wow people. All you can do is give them the conditions by which they can experience something they haven't experienced before.
Tell people what you expect from them, otherwise you won't get it. I'm doing a study right now. What is very clear is that the senior mentors come into it with a totally different expectation set than the junior mentees. Without that alignment, the junior people say, well, I'm not getting what I want. I'm just going to remove myself from getting mentoring. And then that has long-term effects on their capabilities and their success in their careers. Welcome to Science of Leadership, where we explore what it takes to build ever better leaders through evidence-based insights and conversations with people who lead in the world's most complex environments. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm delighted to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today, we're talking about a really important leadership challenge. How do you bring smart people together to tackle wicked problems, those complex, multi-layered, no clear answer problems that define modern life? And how do you create the conditions for truly innovative solutions? To help us explore this, I'm joined by someone who spends his days building high-trust relationships among researchers, industry leaders, government partners, and innovation teams to solve some of the world's hardest wicked problems. Chris Dunphy is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and was a naval aviator. Now he's the program director of the Industrial Liaison Program at MIT's Office of Corporate Relations, where he works at the intersection of academia, industry, and global-scale problem-solving, connecting elite researchers, visionary corporations, and mission-driven organizations to accelerate discovery and innovation. Chris, thank you for joining me on the Science of Leadership, and thank you for your service to our nation.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be here. I'm excited about this. These are the conversations that I have every day. In fact, I just spent the last hour down by the coffee machine talking to one of my colleagues about different faculty members as we were both struggling with widening the aperture of who we connect with our member companies. And I focus on the defense industry. He focuses on the mining industry, but there's so much commonality between what people are interested in relative to MIT. It really doesn't matter what I was telling him about this conversation I was about to have, and he was a little bit jealous. I'll put it that way.
Well, hopefully the end product will make him even more so. Well, Chris, let's get down to business here. When you're looking at bringing people together to collaborate on the types of groundbreaking ideas that MIT is known for, what's the crux of it for accomplishing that for you?
For me, the crux is humility, focus, and relationships. I joke to my wife every morning as I'm leaving, I'm off to be the dumbest guy in the room for the next 8 hours. And it's kind of a faux humility, but my job is to create the right space for collaboration in order to get industry that has a focus, government who has a focus, and academia that has a focus. So having relationships with each of those and understanding what is their driver allows me to communicate between those three different factions in order to get to a win-win. It's a lot of blocking and tackling. We used to call it pick and shovel work. It's not glamorous, but if you get it done correctly, you end up with the right people in the right space, and then you kind of sit back and watch the magic happen.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm just thinking about this idea of being the dumbest guy in the room, and really, you said creating the space where people can come together and collaborate, and that's at the heart of leadership. Really, is I think we have a lot of people in leadership positions who think that they have to be the smartest person in the room, and you have to have competence. There's no doubt, but when we spend all of our energy trying to be the smartest person in the room, we end up losing so much ground with relationships with others that we're working with. We create an environment, I think, that isn't actually conducive to building those teams and so forth. And so this idea of being able to step back from being the person in the limelight to creating that space, that's so valuable of an insight.
It's sometimes hard to do. It's something I learned from when I was in the Navy, being on an admiral staff. You know, you grow up, you go to the Naval Academy, you're a junior officer, mid-grade officer, and you think, the admiral knows everything. And I got the opportunity, I was on admiral staff during wartime, and the fact that he would stop a briefing, he would stop and say, what does that mean? There was an acronym or there was a word or something like that. And he had and it wasn't aggressive, but he wanted to understand. And he said, there's some things here that I don't understand. So explain it to me. Talk to me like I'm a fifth grader. I know I'm a 3-star. I know I'm a 2-star. And I've carried that since then sometimes, because you assume that people know more than they do, and then you're embarrassed if you don't understand what people are talking about. And I go through that all the time here. I have found that my job requires me to be about 2 inches deep and about 10 miles wide. is probably the best way to put it. So you can't be an expert on anything, but you try to be conversant in it so that you can make connections.
Yeah. This idea of humility on the part of the leader, of being conversant, being able to speak the language, which is I've got so many ideas running through my head, but this is something I want to get to in a second. But I'm kind of stewing on this concept that great leaders don't have all the answers. They're willing to go to the people who do. They're willing to say, I don't know, but this person does. I'm going to go to them and get the answer, because ultimately they're more concerned about getting the right answer instead of looking like they're right.
It's funny. The industrial liaison program here at MIT is a membership program. Companies, organizations pay a nominal fee to be part of the program, and they get a program director like myself who manages their relationship with MIT. The best ones are the members that at the CTO level, at the C-suite level, are cognizant of that and are wanting to go someplace to learn. You go to universities to learn. So it's not necessarily to get the direct answer, but to go through the learning process. I had an executive say to me, he runs a research center for one of the defense contractors. He's like, I've got 750 PhDs that work for me every day. I want to bring them to MIT to show them that they don't have all the answers and that this job is about constantly re-educating yourself. Conversely, I see the MIT professors that do not walk in and start engaging with industry and saying, this is the way it is. It's the conversation. They go, oh, well, you guys are doing this. And that all of a sudden a conversation takes place about something the professor didn't know. There's an awe factor. Come to MIT, the MIT PhD faculty member knows everything. And when they discover that they don't, that they're very inquisitive and they're using it to kind of shape their research, it's really magical to watch. That it's not a teaching moment, it's a conversation moment where they arrive at answers.
So as you're talking about dealing with these disparate groups, scientists, executives, investors, government officials, others, they have, as we hit on just a minute ago, this sort of completely different languages, right? They've got different languages they speak, whether it's their acronyms or their field of study or expertise. They have different incentives. They have different professional cultures. How do you get them, all these people with different sort of characteristics, to trust each other?
First, I frame what my job is, that I am an MIT salaried employee. So there's no deal flow. So I am not bringing people together with any kind of financial incentive. If a company decides to work with MIT or a government agency with MIT, I don't get a piece of their membership fee. If they sponsor research, I do not get that. So by framing it that way, I say, if this works out, great. If this doesn't work out, great. My job is to get you folks together because I think there's a fit here. Second is I have to be very aware that time is probably the most precious commodity, and I spell that out for both executives in industry and government have limited time. MIT faculty have very limited time, so I don't waste their time. Get to the crux of the matter and understand that the faculty are looking to do research, published research. They are not there to produce a widget or a prototype, and industry is there to get insight into what is coming down the pike. What's going to happen the day after tomorrow. When we frame it that way and nobody's expecting to walk out with a widget, then we start to have trust because expectations have been leveled.
Let me pause here for a second and remind our listeners that my book, The 4 Stars of Leadership, is now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and essentially all online outlets. It's getting rave reviews, and I'm certain you will find it not only informative, but also inspiring. So I hope you'll order your copy today. Now let's get back to this interesting conversation. Do you have a good story from your career that demonstrates what it looks like to bring those different people together and build those bridges?
Yes, I do. I've had organizations that do it well. I've had organizations that don't do it well. The organizations that do it well step back and look at MIT as a relationship, not a transaction. So they come here to recruit students, to learn about technology, and to upskill their workforce. I have one example of it's a defense contractor. I won't name them, that came here, started in January, and they first laid out 38 technologies that they were interested in that they didn't think that they were doing enough research in. And then we mapped out who was doing that type of research here at MIT. And then we started, it's almost like speed dating, started connecting the folks within this defense contractor with certain professors. Sometimes it clicks, sometimes it doesn't. The result was brought 3 different research groups here to MIT, and they spent one day with faculty. I set up 8 different faculty, and then the next day locked them in a room. And they did an offsite without any phones or laptops or anything like that. And they digested everything they learned. And they came out with an engagement plan of how they wanted to engage with certain professors, and then started to break it down at the lower levels. So the C-level folks kind of drove where they wanted to go, and then let the subject matter experts start to take it in different ways, and they were empowered then to get into NDAs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how it's supposed to work, where it's a full engagement. It's great for me because I tell them, I said, you guys are the prototype. If I could duplicate that with every organization, my job would be a lot easier. I still think it's the best, other than flying off the carrier. This is the best job I've had in my entire life.
Well, that's great. I think I could imagine that'd be very fulfilling to be able to bring groups together like that and help them move toward innovation and achieving things that perhaps they were hopeful for but weren't certain that they could achieve. So
It's like raising children, and I hate to put it that way, but once you've made the introductions and there's a bunch of different engagements going on, I kind of say I don't have to be involved in every conversation anymore. One, because I don't have the bandwidth. Two, quite honestly, I'm not going to understand what you guys are talking about anymore as you start to get into the nuts and bolts of it. I just kind of track along to make sure that they're not hitting roadblocks that I can help eliminate, which are typically logistical, or there's something to do with IP, or there's a dynamic tension between what industry wants and what academia wants. Industry wants to be able to apply technology in order to grow their business. Academia wants to publish. Okay, so a lot of ideas come from industry that go into academia, and they become the basis for a master's or a PhD thesis that is done under the guidance of a faculty member. So that guidance that's coming from industry is really fulfilling a need that's real world and is not notional. So when they both understand how that works, and they're not into the IP, who gets what for what, it works. If it becomes transactional, there are times when you say, this, you might do better, with a consulting company, and the consulting companies are there to provide that kind of service. This is a different pathway.
in thinking about my own experience with building multidisciplinary teams, I've done that a number of times in my medical career. The things that I kind of, as I've looked back on it, preparing for our conversation, trying to think of how did I go about it? What were the things I always seemed to do? It was finding the thing, whatever it was, for the individual who's going to be part of this team. And in the last one I built, we had 15 different disciplines coming
Wow.
together to work toward this common goal of helping these patients. And so everybody comes into that with a different frame of reference, a different goal set, and so forth. Getting to know those people well enough to understand what it is that they're hoping to do and get out of the interaction, and then showing them how, if you do this, I can show you these are the ways that we will be able to actualize that for you with your participation. And then once they get into it, it becomes, at least my experience, they actually start having fun.
Yeah.
Because now they see that it's going to happen, and they're interacting with these people who have really different perspectives, and it's refreshing and enjoyable. And then this energy just ramps up, and all these ideas start flowing left and right. And it's the magic happens, I guess.
It is the magic, and I see it when professors here bring their graduate students in, and let graduate students engage with industry on what they're working on, their master's thesis, their PhD thesis, be it in robotics or AI or data or something, because you can't fake that type of excitement, and it is infectious. You see companies leave here and they're really energized, and then you got to kind of get lightning in a bottle, and that's their fear, that when they get back to the 700 emails that are in their inbox, when they get back to, that they don't lose the momentum that they had by coming here, because it really is, refreshing. You have all these ideas and pathways. So, the other part of my job, leading them, is to make sure that we continue that contact and don't let it kind of slip off the priority without forcing it. So it's a balancing act. But there has to be somebody who owns the process, and a lot of times that becomes me, for both sides.
Well, Chris, now that we know what we're talking about, what it looks like to build these sorts of teams, can you share with us why being able to build these relationships is so essential for collaboration and solving these really complex, wicked problems that MIT is known for solving?
There's 1,000 researchers here at MIT, so it's absolutely impossible to know everything that's going on at MIT. So my job is broken into three parts: to spend a third of my time learning as much as I can about what's going on at MIT, a third of my time knowing what's going on with my member companies. I have 12 companies, government agencies that I have that are in my portfolio. And then another third is looking for other organizations that may be adjacent that can add to this type of ecosystem. It's important because, and I saw it when I first started here. You get comfortable with a small group of researchers who you know, and you keep going back to the well, keep going back to the well. The relationships come with making yourself uncomfortable and going out and reaching out and getting to know new professors who are doing different research. And it may not be in what I would think of as a aerospace defense mindset, but you know what? It's one off and it makes sense to my members. And sometimes when I start talking to them, like, take a look at what this professor's doing, and it clicks with them. So the trust comes from I haven't steered my members wrong, and the trust comes from the faculty members. I kind of have to say, I know this doesn't fit in your research portfolio, but trust me here for a little bit, 45 minutes. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And sometimes it doesn't. And the relationships get better sometimes if you turn around and say, hey, I missed on that one. There was no fit on it, but I understand your research much better now, and I will keep my eyes open because all researchers are looking for sponsors and they want to engage. So, admitting when you kind of struck out is important in order to uh, uh, build that trust, because everything isn't a home run.
Yeah. So listening to that, what I'm hearing is having those collaborations, building out those relationships provides insurance, if you will, some buffer against stagnation because you bring in other people's perspectives that people may not even considered. It broadens the aperture so that you have more options available that have a chance to be, as you said, a home run. Whereas if you're only dealing with a couple of people, then that really restricts your ability to see larger, perhaps more innovative opportunities.
It's one of the things that I do. I just had a foreign government in, and they were interested in space automation. Small company, small country, so they don't have a big budget. But we spent 2 days with professors, and then I spent a half a day with MIT affiliated startups that are working in the space industries. And they came in and talked about what their companies were doing. So, MIT is the mind and the hand, but these startups that were very small and born out of research that was done here, and they turned it into a business entity, really fires up some of these big organizations. So introducing startups to companies that have moved out of the theoretical into the practical, and are really hoping to partner with a bigger company to bring somebody onto their board of directors for a number of different reasons is another way to build that relationship. The relationship doesn't necessarily have to be with MIT, just the faculty. It can be these byproducts of MIT, where there's 850 MIT affiliated startups that we work with that are at different ages of maturity. They're the best poster child for what MIT produces. Like, this is a real company, and you go, how did somebody think of that, and what they're doing on a small scale?
On our podcast, usually around this time, I ask our guests to share a story that showcases where the idea, whatever the concept is, what kind of leadership concept we're discussing, was essential for success of an organization. But to me, it almost feels like in this scenario, it might be easier to discuss a story where that lack of collaboration, that lack of building a multidisciplinary team result in failure of accomplishing the mission or the target. I don't know your thoughts on that, or if you have a story that goes either way, but
I've got two quick stories on things that I would say were misses. One was a government agency, and one was a private company. And I mentioned the term before. They both approached the relationship with MIT, with universities as a whole, as a transaction. On the government side, government agencies are used to scoping a problem, putting out a request for information, and putting out an RFP and getting a proposal back. They were looking at academia that way. So, this is our problem, come back and solve it. And then delegated it so far down in the organization that the person that was actually tasked with the relationship didn't have the legitimate authority really to make any decisions. So they were in the business of collecting metrics. How many times did we talk? How many different professors, how many people attended this meeting? And that's no way to measure or quantify innovation or collaboration. And at the end of the year, they're like, we're not really seeing the ROI from the year that we spent at MIT. I'm like, well, I said, it's kind of akin to somebody that joins the gym full of fervor on the 1st of January and says, yep, I'm going to get in shape. Then they don't go to the gym until October. And then they're like, I really don't see I got anything out of this gym membership. Well, you didn't go and do anything. You just kept driving
Sure.
by it. And that sometimes happens. So not having a full understanding at the C level is a problem. The other one was a company, and they joined with all the great intentions. And then again, they delegated it down to someone who was a new hire, didn't understand the company, and was given the title of manager of college partnerships. So he had 5 different colleges that he was working with. And again, he was just going through the motions of collecting metrics so that they could measure it. I tried a number of different ways to try to get them to come visit. If you don't visit MIT, it's never going to work. If you try to do it in a virtual manner, it's never going to work. You got to get on a plane. You got to come here for a couple of days. That is the game changer. Same token, I've taken professors and we have gone to companies. We've gone and spent 2 days at the company. That is also a game changer. But if you try to do it in our virtual world coming out of COVID, it's typically a recipe for a fail.
Thanks for sharing those. This idea that we're talking about of collaborative teams and building those really resonates with leadership science. In their 2022 review of the scientific literature, Simons, Gustafson, and Nees found across multiple studies that interdisciplinary collaboration results in broader knowledge within the team, as well as leads to greater creativity, increased innovation, and better problem solving, all of which we've been hitting on so far. But as we've already heard, successful interdisciplinary collaboration, like what happens at MIT, doesn't just happen because smart people are in the same room, but as Chris has been sharing, it's crafted intentionally. It's designed, it's led, it's continually developed, and often in person. And also an important point that I think relates to this idea of intentionality is that sometimes in different domains, people will talk about bringing together diverse groups and that there's no challenge to that idea, right? But the reality is when you bring diverse groups together, there's usually a lot of friction. People have very strong opinions, different perspectives, and it's getting them to come together and speak the same language that's really the crux of that interaction a lot of times. So addressing that and smoothing those interfaces, I think, is prime real estate for leadership.
I agree. When you talk about interdisciplinary, when you think about MIT, most people, well, we're going to bring our data scientists, we're going to bring our engineers, we're going to bring folks that are doing the lab work, the tech work. But I always encourage, bring your HR folks, bring your legal folks, bring the folks that are doing recruiting, not just managing workforce. Bring your learning folks. Every corporation, every organization has an internal learning. Because even though they may not be the ones that are nodding as the third differential equation goes up on the screen from a professor, they're the ones that are sitting back and asking some really relevant questions about how do we go about making this work within our organization. And they bring in things like upscaling the workforce, or with AI, it's such a challenge for every organization. And it's not necessarily the tech challenge, but it's the implementation challenge. And if you don't have those other functions in the room, you can get much further down the x-axis where you're making all this progress. But if you have to go all the way back to the null, it's really difficult if you haven't involved everybody as you're trying to institute change.
That's such a great point because we don't operate in a vacuum. And there's so many different factors that come into play that we never even think about. Like you mentioned, legal. A lot of times that's never even on people's radar, but that's really important. If you, as you say, if you get way down the axis and then suddenly it's like, oh wait, there's this major legal hurdle,
Right.
then you may have to abandon the whole project because it's not something you could overcome. Whereas you could have known that on the front end, maybe redesign things just a little bit, and come out with a totally different outcome.
Most organizations that come here, they're interested in tech. I always try to include at least 1 or 2 professors from Sloan, from the School of Management, because it goes everywhere from workforce development to compliance issues. The security studies programs start to look at international implications. Simple things like energy very quickly get into policy. So you're not just talking about technology, you're talking about how do you operate under policy and where's policy going on those. And they haven't been thought of. So it goes back to trust. once the organization trusts you and say, I know this wasn't on your Christmas list of people that you wanted to see, but for 45 minutes, I think you should talk to Professor X because he is really plugged into digital transformation from an organizational standpoint. He's not going to talk about the tech side of it, but for the executives, they go, wow, we hadn't really thought about that. Or the professor gets a feedback of, wow, they're doing something that I haven't really incorporated into how my research is going. And you know what? I would like to go visit that company and take a look at how they are doing something. The learning goes the other way too. The learning goes back into MIT research all the time because there's so many innovative things going on inside companies that are not shared with academia.
Well, Chris, now that we see why this is so important for successful leadership, let's turn our attention toward the practical side of things. What can our listeners start doing to increase their capabilities in bringing people together as a team?
Framing the reason why you're there. I always ask, what do you expect to get out of this? I get a call from a company or get an email from a company. Hey, we'd like to come talk about X, Y, and Z. Right? What are your expectations? What do you expect to get out of this? And refine it down and have a this is part of my military. Have a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary plan. You don't always get exactly what you want. You pick a date that you're going to come visit, or you pick a day that you're going to do an offsite, or pick a day that, hey, we've got the perfect combination of our folks. Well, guess what? The MIT professors that you wanted may not be available that time. So being able to say, what do I want to get out of this? Is it certain thoughts? Is it certain technology? Or is it a certain experience? So I think if you frame expectations and manage expectations, you can get folks to collaborate in a real sense, rather than that they're going to walk out with a solution. You never walk out with a solution at the end of one day. But what you walk out is you've got a discussion that you want to continue the next day and you want to follow up. And if it looks like success, then those folks start talking offline to each other. And then again, it's my child analogy. Now your child's riding the bike without you holding on to the back of the seat anymore, and they are off on their own, and you move on to the next problem. So managing expectations is very difficult to do because we always want to sell that we've got the solution and we're here to help and wow people. And sometimes you can't wow people. All you can do is give them the conditions by which they can experience something that they haven't experienced before.
Setting expectations is something that's, I think it's on one hand elementary, but on the other, it's something that people so often fail to do. They assume that this is what we're going to try to do, or this person wants that, or whatever it may be. And so that was something as I was working on my book and things, setting expectations. Tell people what you expect from them, otherwise you won't get it. And then I'm doing a study right now where I'm looking at expectations and why junior people may not be engaging in mentorship. And what is very clear, the biggest finding in the study so far, and I don't think it's going to change because we're almost finished collecting data, but is that the senior mentors come into it with a totally different expectation set than the junior mentees. And so without that alignment, the junior people say, well, I'm not getting what I want. I'm just going to remove myself from getting mentoring. And then that has long-term effects on their capabilities and their success in their careers. And that translates to exactly what you're saying, that setting expectations is critical to success.
When a group comes in, usually between 12 to 15 from an organization, as people are doing their introductions of who they are, because I don't know usually who everybody is, just my point of contact, and they're introducing themselves. I always ask, what do you expect to get out of the next 2 days, 3 days that you're here at MIT? And based on their function, it's the other people in the group haven't heard what that person is expecting to get out of it. So it's a good scene setter. I learned a year ago, professors now have asked a lot of times saying, hey, what are they hoping to get out of it? And can you set up a Zoom call with somebody? I just want to talk to them for 15 minutes before they come to visit so they can align themselves so that their expectations are matched with the subject matter expert within the organization. Just basically to do exactly what you said, to get this closer to this. So you avoid that and make the most out of the time that you have in person. Again, that goes back to pick and shovel work. Nobody likes setting up Zoom calls and aligning schedules and everything like that, but it makes the day run so much better because there's not a disconnect from the get-go.
Absolutely. One of the techniques for great teaching, at least of adult learners, I learned this when I was doing a course at my previous institution, but is typically I'm the professor, right? And so I go into this setting and I've got medical students, residents, fellows, et cetera, and I just tell them what I think they should know. But the actual masterful approach is to stop and say, what are you hoping to learn today? What is important for your learning? What do you want to get out of this? And often it is far removed from what I might expect them to say. But it also gives us, okay, a framework. This is what they want to learn. We'll cover that. And at least they will have taken away something they were interested in. Whereas I might be wanting to talk about something that's really important to me that has no bearing on their future, what they'll be doing for the rest of their life. So anyway, that's a similar sort of thing when it comes to setting expectations.
It is completely, and professors are the same way. I've had pushback numerous times where I don't see how my research is relevant to this company, and, I give it a couple of different attempts to frame it, and sometimes the professor's right, sometimes they're open-minded and say, "Yeah, I can make time in my schedule, I would like to meet with them. You've kind of you've convinced me." Especially if they're doing research that they don't see as military focused, because we all who have not served have an idea that we've got from TV and movies and whatnot of what the military is, when that really isn't what it is. And they're like, well, how does climate? Well, the ocean is climate and the Navy is in the ocean. And all of a sudden they go, oh, all right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now I get it. I said, we're not talking about blowing things up. We're talking about, how do we look at soil, salinity, weather, wave height, those types of things. So it comes down to language and acronyms. I'm sure you in the medical field must go through that all the time. And between academia and government and technology and aviation, there are so many acronyms that all mean the same thing. I mean, as a pilot, MDA was minimum descent altitude, and then when I was working at Raytheon, MDA was the Missile Defense Agency, and sometimes I'd be in meetings going, "Why are they talking about the minimum descent altitude in this meeting?" You
Yeah.
learn. It's
Yeah.
always learning.
This hits on, just as an aside on the acronym thing, and I remember when I was in the military, it was like, we need a dictionary. So, because there were times people just seems like just paragraphs that were just all acronyms. But just yesterday, I was in my clinic, cardiology clinic, and in medicine, there are acronyms just as you were saying that mean totally different things for different people. So we had a patient who was referred to our cardiology clinic for ASD. So in congenital heart disease, that's an atrial septal defect. Okay. But the actual issue that the child had was autism spectrum disorder, ASD, right? And so they should have been going to a totally different specialist, but their primary doctor saw ASD and referred them to a cardiologist instead of going to the people that they actually needed to see. They didn't need to see us at all. And so, just from the standpoint of make sure you're speaking the correct language and that
Correct
sort of thing.
language. You brought up a dictionary. When I was a junior officer, I was given by my executive officer. There is a publication out there called the DICNAVAB, which is an acronym for the Dictionary of Naval Abbreviations, which I went through about 12 PCF moves that I would bring with me. And I'm sure it's gotten much bigger with AI and whatnot. But yeah, the DICNAVAB, it was a running joke.
Yeah. Well, as I was thinking about our conversation and how to build collaboration, I got to admit, I started thinking about what are the barriers to it. If we know those barriers, I think we can then identify what's needed to overcome them. So when I look at the literature, the things that repeatedly come up as barriers to effective collaboration include poor communication, issues with teamwork, professional identity, organizational procedural rules and regulations. So in seeking to foster collaboration, we have to address those four big categories of barriers. And so then as I was thinking more practically, again, trying to give our listeners take home practical points about how to foster collaboration in these interdisciplinary teams, I really focused on ideas surrounding the team and communication. I came up with a few steps that I think can build or help build collaborative relationships. So one, and you mentioned this earlier, is create proximity. You were talking about go to MIT or go to the corporation or whatever it may be. People collaborate better when they know each other. When they get to know each other better, occurs in proximity. We're sitting together, we're having lunch, we're doing whatever. Studies have shown you're more, I mean, it makes sense. You're more
Yeah,
likely to be friends with people who are close to you, like
right.
physically close to you, right? So those interactions. So that's one thing. The second thing, which we just were talking about, is define the common language. So to collaborate, we have to speak the same language. We can't be using ASD for one thing and it means something else. It's got to mean the same thing. So that language could be literally the same language, but more often than not, it's just identifying what we're trying to accomplish. Those expectations, making sure that what one person means by a given word or concept is the same as what others mean, things like that. Number three was ensure psychological safety. I know you are familiar with Amy Edmondson's work. Psychological safety is this concept that we're safe to share our perspectives, experiences, and ideas, and that's vital for great teamwork. So those are three things that kind of came to my mind.
For me, the biggest barrier typically is eliminating preconceptions. in both directions. So companies have a preconception of what MIT is, what an MIT professor does. Everything is in Goodwill Hunting. Every wall does not have a 14-foot formula on it. By the same token, some professors look at a company and look at the industry they're in and say that doesn't pertain to me, or what they're doing right now doesn't align with how I'm driving my research. And a lot of that comes up with energy companies. When we're talking about sustainability, are they really serious about sustainability, et cetera? But you can only do so much research online, and you have a preconception about that. If I can break down the preconception, which lends itself to what you said, to proximity, the preconception goes away once you have proximity. And I always advocate when I have companies visit that we do a working lunch. I have typically the professor that seems the most adjacent, that is not central, join us for lunch. So part of it is he's sitting around U-shaped table, and we have lunch together after he's done his presentation. You start talking about, oh yeah, well, I was also, I was an adjunct professor. I was in Switzerland for a couple of years, and that comes out and it humanizes everybody, and then things change. But that preconception is very difficult, especially professors dealing with certain government agencies. I mean, it's just natural, because that's we're defined by the organization that we are part of. So we do it in the military all the time. I have preconceptions of what an Air Force guy is, or a Marine, or an Army guy, and some of them are facetious, some of them are real. But you get on a joint staff and you go, oh, these guys are as screwed up as we are. That's great. I got it.
Yeah. Well, Chris, as we wrap up this episode, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
If you could go back to that young midshipman at the Naval Academy and give him one piece of leadership advice, what would it be?
So that young midshipman was 19 to 23, thought he knew everything, didn't. I would go back and I would tell him to take more risk. And when I say risk, I mean, I went to flight school. I learned how to fly, flew off small ships and aircraft carriers. I don't mean physical risk, but take career risk. I turned down opportunities because I didn't want to be away from my girlfriend. I had the opportunity to go to the German Naval Academy for a semester. And my 20-year-old brain says, I don't really like studying German, and I'm not really that crazy about our Naval Academy right now. So why would I want to go to the German Naval Academy? I look back on it and go, oh, what an idiot. So take more risk. Sometimes that risk, that adjacent path leads you someplace. I never thought I would be in academia at age 61. And it wasn't because I was seeking it, but it was because of other things that I had done and relationships that I built. I'm here literally because of somebody I knew from a prior life. And if I hadn't, as I got older, I embraced risk more and more. And I think we tend not to do that. I see that with my children. Leave home. Do I want to go away to school? That type of thing. But I should have embraced more risk and be more curious. Ask questions. The admiral that says, "Well, wait a minute. What does that mean?" Stop the briefing and ask a question. Don't be the new guy nodding and walk out and go, "I don't have any idea what anybody was talking about," because you can't 3 weeks later or a month later go, "What does that mean?" They go, "Where have you been for the last month? We've been talking about this and you've been nodding like an idiot." So that's what I would tell 20-year-old Chris Dunphy.
Yeah. Well, those are great pieces of advice. Thanks for sharing those. I think it's a great way to end out our conversation. Chris, thanks for being on the Science of Leadership.
Tom, thank you very much. I welcome this opportunity, and I'm fascinated by the way that you are taking such an open topic and attacking it from all sides. I think there's a lot to learn there for everybody, and I've shared your Science of Leadership podcast with a number of my friends, and
Thanks.
they're like, "Whoa, Zinni's on here," and so and so. I said, "Yeah." You even had Manzier, who's a legend in the naval aviation community. So thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.